Although a very simple concept, the contribution margin is one of the most important numbers in your business and one that you should always take into account when making any type of product-related decisions. Now, if you don't know what the contribution margin is, how you calculate it, or why it's so important, keep watching to find out. So throughout the video, we'll be using the example of a bakery, the one you may already know from the video about the cost structure. In case you haven't seen that one of the bakery's employees is a baker, and he bakes everything there. Bread, pastries, pies, cakes, everything. But the bakery also has a specialized cake decorator whose only job consists of decorating these beautiful wedding cakes. So, as we saw in the video about the cost structure, if the costs change as the number of units produced changes, we call them variable costs. Otherwise, we say they are fixed costs. And, if they can be easily linked to the cost object we're analyzing, we say they're direct costs, while if they need to be allocated, we say they are indirect. If you want more details on this, I suggest you watch the video about the cost structure, which I link below. In the case of the wedding cakes production line, examples of direct variable costs would be the ingredients used to manufacture the cakes or the package used to deliver them in. An example of direct fixed costs would be the cost of the cake decorator that works on the wedding cakes and on nothing else. Examples of indirect variable costs would be the electricity required to keep the ovens working or the water required to wash the utensils used to make each cake. Lastly, indirect fixed costs would be the rent of the bakery and the salaries of the employees that are shared with other cakes and breads production lines. Now, for calculating the contribution margin, we only care about variable costs. In fact, the contribution margin per unit is equal to selling price minus variable costs. But why only consider variable costs? After all, we have to cover both variable and fixed costs, right? Well, the thing is, we want to use the contribution margin to make decisions for the future, so we will be working with estimates. And while variable costs per unit do not change much depending on how many units we produce, fixed costs do change a lot, or may change a lot. And since we are working with estimates and we have to predict how many units we will produce, our estimation of the fixed costs per unit may be off by a lot. So, working with fixed costs per unit can be very problematic because of the big uncertainty regarding the number. And that's why we want to work with the contribution margin, which by taking the fixed costs per unit out of our analysis eliminates a potentially huge source of error. Anyway, let's now get back to our wedding cakes production line and see how we would calculate our contribution margin per unit. Let's assume we are selling each cake for $100, and our variable costs are $15 for direct costs and $5 for indirect. This means that if we subtract these costs to the selling price, we get a margin of $80 per cake, and that's our contribution margin per unit. One note on implementing this in practice though. While in theory these cost calculations seem very simple to do, in practice getting to this $5 may not be so easy. After all, how easy would it be to calculate how much electricity, water, and other indirect variable things we are spending per cake? One important thing to note here is that although we could perfectly calculate our contribution margin per unit for the past, the one that's really interesting for making decisions for the future is the future one. So we are trying to calculate future costs, and we will never be able to perfectly nail those down. So our contribution margin will never be exactly right, and we have to be comfortable with that. We have to work with estimates and rough numbers, focus on things that are material to our variable cost per unit, and be okay with knowing that we will always have some degree of error. And the important thing to know is on which side we can be making that error so that we don't end up making decisions based on a completely stupid number. But anyway, sorry for the long parenthesis. Let's go back to our bakery and see what those $80 per cake mean. These $80 mean that whenever we sell a cake, we get a margin of $80 that contributes to cover our fixed costs, hence the name contribution margin. This allows us to calculate how many units we would need to sell to cover all our costs, also known as the break-even point. And once our fixed costs are covered, the $80 tells us by how much our profit would grow with each cake we sell, before taxes, of course. Now, in our example, we have seen that the bakery has a specialized wedding cake decorator that costs $1,500 per month, which is a direct cost of producing wedding cakes. Obviously, the wedding cake's production line should generate enough margin to cover this cost. But the wedding cake production unit also needs to cover its share of the bakery's indirect fixed costs, which in our example amounts to $2,000. An important thing to note here is that those $2,000 are the part of the overall business fixed costs that we consider that should be covered by the wedding cake's production line. And it's extremely important to realize that this is what we consider that should be covered by the wedding cake's production line, because deciding which part of the overall fixed costs should be covered by each business unit is a judgment call. And that's one more reason why it's good to work with a contribution margin which isn't affected by this decision. Anyway, summing up, the wedding cake's total contribution margin must be enough to cover the $1,500 in costs that we have because we make them, and $2,000 of the overall fixed costs that we decided that should be covered by the wedding cake's production. This means that we want our wedding cake business to cover a total of $3,500 of fixed costs per month. Since the contribution margin per each wedding cake is $80, when we divide the $3,500 by the 80, we come to the conclusion that we would need to sell 43.75 cakes every month for $100 just to cover all our costs. Well, actually 44, since we can sell wedding cakes by the piece. And this is why the contribution margin is such an important number to know. Would selling 44 cakes for $100 each seem like a reasonable thing to do? Or do we need to take action to improve this minimum sales threshold, such as raise our prices or cut our costs? Because if selling these 44 cakes per month isn't a reasonable expectation, this business may have a huge problem. In this case, we would have to make a further analysis to understand if the $2,000 of fixed cost allocation is a fair one. And if we find that it is, then this business really has a big problem. And this is one of those issues that can be easily caught by doing a simple contribution margin analysis, and a reason why I consider it to be so important for anyone that's running any business. So, in case you want to dig deeper into these types of analysis, I'll link some related videos below. And if anything isn't clear, let me know in the comments. See you in the next video. Bye!